The price of everything is skyrocketing, and supply chain problems have left a lot of grocery store shelves bare. Putting a half or a whole beef in your freezer is a great way to create a buffer against any shortages and secure food for your family for up to a year or longer. Our half beef is ready at the processor, and this morning I'm going to go pick it up. We'll talk about how much meat you could expect to get off of a half or a whole beef, and about how many of each cut you could expect to put in your freezer. My name's Reagan, and this is the GWP Homestead. When you decide you're going to buy a half or a whole beef, you're going to see a lot of different weight terms thrown around. It may be obvious to some, but the weight of your beef cattle does not directly translate into how much meat goes into your freezer. If you end up with a 1,200-pound steer, you're not going to be bringing home 1,200 pounds of meat. The weight of that animal is considered the live weight, or the weight on the hoof. This is how much that steer weighs whenever he steps off the trailer and goes into the processing facility. Your hanging weight or carcass weight is the weight of that animal once the head and the hide have been removed, once all the internal organs are taken out, and that meat is ready to dry age in a cooler. Do you remember in the movie Rocky when he was in the cooler training punching all the meat? That's what the meat looks like when they take the hanging weight. On most beef cattle, your hanging weight is between 55 and 60% of the live weight of the animal. A lot of things go into determining that percentage, such as the breed of cattle and how much fat's on the carcass. And most of the time, once that carcass is broken down, the amount of meat you put into your freezer is about 60% of the hanging weight. So for example, on the half beef that we just put into our freezer, the total live weight of that animal was about 1,280 pounds. Our hanging weight was 760 pounds, which I think was about 59% of the live weight. And when you divide that number in half, multiply it by 0.6, 60%, we ended up with just about 225 pounds of meat in our freezer. 225 pounds of beef is plenty to feed our family for a year. So now that we figured out how much meat we have in the freezer, how many steaks did we get? Most of the time when you get a beef processed, about 30% of that weight ends up in steaks, about another 30% ends up in roast, and the remaining 40% ends up in ground beef. Now, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, give or take, here or there. But from the research I've done and our real-world experiences doing this ourselves, it's pretty close to accurate. I understand that I've thrown a lot of percentages at you. The reality is, when that freezer's full, you're going to have quite the feeling of relief. And there's a lot of ground beef. This time, in addition to your pretty standard ribeye, chuck roast, sirloin cuts, we decided to get a little bit more adventurous. We're trying a few things that we hadn't tried before, like a tri-tip, Korean-style short ribs, and ossobuco or cross-cut foreshank. There are a few other things we decided to try as well. I'll put them all down in the description. I didn't really want to dig anything else out of the freezer. That's another huge benefit of having a beef custom processed. Most of the time you can pick and choose how you want your beef cut. How thick you want your steaks, how big you want your roast. Do you want your hamburger in 1 or 2 pound rolls? Do you want any pre-pattied burgers? And the first time you look at a processing cut sheet, you're probably going to be overwhelmed, and that's totally okay. Your processor should be able to answer any questions you have. The internet is full of information, and if it comes down to it and you have questions, feel free to reach out to us here on Instagram or anywhere else we are. We try to be helpful when we can be. We're incredibly excited to be trying some of these cuts this year. I think that ossobuco is going to be incredible in a soup pot this winter. If you're interested in seeing that or anything else we're going to be cooking this year, feel free to drop it down in the comments. I love hearing from you. If you're in the western Kentucky area and are interested in freezer beef, we only recommend our friends at Futrell Farms. They're great people and they raise great cattle. Their contact information is in the description. Tell them we sent you. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you and your family are happy and healthy. My name's Reagan. This is the GWP Homestead. See y'all soon.